Thank you, Alex. Thank you very much. Gary, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Create in me a pure heart, O my God, and renew a tranquil conscience within me, O my hope. Through the spirit of power, confirm thou me in thy cause, O my best beloved, and by the light of thy glory, reveal unto me thy path, O thou the goal of my desire. Through the power of thy transcendent might, lift me up unto the heaven of thy holiness, O source of my being, and by the breezes of thine eternity, gladden me, O thou who art my God. Let thine everlasting melodies breathe tranquility on me, O my companion, and let the riches of thine ancient countenance deliver me from all except thee, O my master. And let the tidings of the revelation of thine incorruptible essence bring me joy, O thou who art the most manifest of the manifest and the most hidden of the hidden.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you. Albert, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. I swear by the one true God, this is the day of those who have detached themselves from all but him, the day of those who have recognized his unity, the day whereon God createth with the hands of his power divine beings and imperishable essences, every one of whom will cast the world and all that is therein behind him, and will wax so steadfast in the cause of God that every wise and understanding heart will marvel. There lay concealed within the holy veil and prepared for the service of God a company of his chosen ones, who shall be manifested unto men, who shall aid his cause, who shall be afraid of no one, though the entire human race rise up and war against them. These are ones who before the gaze of the dwellers on earth and the denizens of heaven shall arise and shouting aloud acclaim the name of the Almighty and summon the children of men to the path of God, the all-glorious, the all-praised. The day is approaching when God will have, by an act of his will, raised up a race of men, the nature of which is inscrutable to all save God, the all-powerful, the self-subsisting. He will ere long, out of the bosom of power, draw forth the hands of ascendancy and might, hands who will arise to win the victory for this youth, who will purge mankind from the defilement of the outcast and ungodly. These hands will gird up their loins to champion the faith of God and will, in my name, the self-subsistent, the mighty, subdue the people and kindreds of the earth. They will enter the cities and will inspire with fear the hearts of all their inhabitants. Such are the evidences of the might of God. How fearful, how vehement is his might.
Wow. Thank you, Albert. Thank you. Jane, are you ready?
Yes, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Haideh Sabet. She's an accomplished physician and a much sought after Baha'i speaker. The key to her success is that she picked her parents well. She's the daughter of two exemplary Baha'i physicians who always opened their home to anyone interested in learning more about the Baha'i faith, and the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Following their career choice, she received her medical degree from the Mayo Clinic College of Medicine and Science, and is a neurologist in private practice in Alexandria, Virginia, and an assistant professor in the Department of Neurology at the Georgetown University Medical Center. Among the comments from her patients, Dr. Sabet is exceptional. She has the best bedside manner I've encountered with any doctor, and I've seen many. She's always intentionally welcoming, warm, attentive, and respectful. She never gives up on patients. In addition to medicine, Haideh followed her parents' footsteps in service to the Baha'i faith. She is a champion of the rights of Baha'is in Iran to enroll in university. She serves as a member of the Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of Fairfax County East, the local governing body of the Baha'i faith. As you may know, the Baha'i faith has no clergy, and everyone is encouraged to study the scriptures for themselves and share their own understanding. Growing up in a home where their parents hosted monthly Baha'i talks, Haideh learned very early to study the writings of the faith and speak for herself. By the time she was a teenager, she was giving her own talks at the Bashir Allahi Fireside. And she's continued to study and share many talks on various aspects of the Baha'i faith, including such topics as the power of positivity, the equality of men and women. And her talk on life after death has over 3,500 views on YouTube. Tonight, she shares with us prayer and meditation, our unending conversation with God. Dr. Sabet?
Wow, Jane, that was amazing. Thank you so much. I really want to thank Dr. Bashir Allahi and all of the people who are making these possible for us to have a space where we can grow spiritually, we can learn from each other. I certainly learn every time I look into a topic to discuss with people, and I get to associate with so many people of different backgrounds. So it's really an honor for me to be a part of this series. And if no one knows this, you should know this, that these are the longest running regular firesides in the country. Dr. Bashir Allahi started this, I believe, in his college years, and he has continued. I know this personally, that him and Ziba Jun, this is important to say, would even give the key to their house to the Baha'is so that these firesides can continue and talk about being welcoming to every person of every walk of life. So I am deeply grateful to Dr. Bashir Allahi's example. And I am so thrilled that all of you are, partaking of this wonderful bounty to be in his presence. So I'm very touched to be here with all of you today. This topic was actually a topic that Dr. Bashir Allahi chose, and I appreciate that, he, for good reasons, thought that this might be a good topic to discuss, because as we all know, the world is going through many different birth pangs of coming of age. And so there is a lot of tumult that we find in the world, a lot of questions that are coming up that did not come up in past ages and centuries, and we are having to grapple them all at the same time. And so it is such a unique part of human history that we are living through. And to keep that sense of hope, to keep that connection with our one creator, to keep that spirit alive in each of us is something that I'm sure we're all facing in different ways. We are experiencing personally and collectively all the challenges that are coming to a head. And this is something that the Baha'i faith has foretold will happen and is a necessary part of our next stage in human civilization, to come together as one unified world collective community and to learn from each other, to share in each other's joys and each other's sorrows, to help each other. This is something that we are still learning how to do, and we will continue to struggle through these challenges until we find a time that we can see each other as members of one human family, which is the goal in the Baha'i faith, to bring about the world unity that this world so desperately needs. I'd like to start with a brief introduction to the Baha'i faith for those of us who may not be aware of this new existing world religion, which has now spread to every part of the globe, and its writings have been translated into over 800 languages. The Baha'i faith began in 1844 by a man by the name of the Bab, whose name means the gate. He came to speak to the people of the time to prepare their hearts for the coming of someone that he named the one whom God shall make manifest. And when he did this, he made this announcement in just private to one soul who was actively searching the writings of the Quran and realized that there is a new messenger of God who awaits, who is to come. And it was in that moment when he first gave this intimation to him that a person by the name, and we will come to him very soon, by the name of Abdu'l-Baha was born on the exact day that the Bab made this declaration. And Abdu'l-Baha on May 23rd, 1844, was born on the day that the Baha'i faith began. He will end up becoming a pivotal part of the Baha'i faith, and the center will be named the Center of the Covenant, and will come to the US in 1912 and will spread abroad the teachings of his father. And that was the person that the Bab had declared would be that messenger of God to bring about a new era in the life of humankind. In the very few short next 6 years of the Bab's life, he would be moved from prison to prison. He would be under house arrest. And yet he wrote over 27 volumes, one of which is over 3,000 pages long, still yet to be translated. And in those writings, he professed a very marvelous time for the coming of the one whom God shall make manifest, preparing the people of the time and emblazing the hearts, that desire to bring that time to fruition. And so it came on July 9th, 1850, when he, in front of tens of thousands of people in a public square, he was executed in the northern part of Iran, which is where he made that declaration. And it was thought that with that execution done by the government, that his revelation would cease. The fire that he had ignited would be quelled completely. And yet the Baha'i faith only continued to grow. And actually, as a result of that very day that he was executed, the British generals who were there in that gathering, they immediately sent word to England, and it was published in the United States newspaper of his execution. So this was, they thought, the government of Iran thought that with that execution, everything would be done. And yet there was an immediate effect to go across the ocean and make that announcement of his coming. During this time of this fervor that was happening in Iran, there was a man by the name of Hussein Ali, who became a follower of the Bab. He was from a noble family, and he was supposed to take the career of his father, who was in a high position in the government of Iran. And yet he denounced that. He said that he would instead help the poor. He was actually named the father of the poor. And he would actually, in front of his mansion, he would stand with his wife and would give coins, would give food, would give anything that he had to the poor, and they would stand in long lines in front of his house. When he heard about the message of the Bab, he also was ignited with this faith, and he was thrown into a black pit called the Siah Chal in this capital city of Iran. He was not killed the way that 20,000 other followers of the Bab were killed, because he was from a noble family. And so the government instead threw him in this dungeon, where he stayed for 4 months with a chain that was so heavy, it weighed about 100 pounds, And you can see a replica of the link of that chain when we go on pilgrimage. Baha'is go on pilgrimage to Israel now. You can see it. And it had a name for itself. And it was from that very prison, that dungeon, you can say, which was unfortunately, it was with highway thieves and robbers and murderers. He was chained with many of the other Babis, or followers of the Bab. It was there that he received the first intimations that he was that person that the Bab had announced. He did not make this declaration public, and immediately after the 4 months were over, he was banished from his homeland of Iran, never to come back again. With his family, he traversed the Ottoman Empire, still a prisoner of the Ottoman Empire, until he reached a place which he described as the most great prison. And it is a prison that we actually visit when we go on pilgrimage. Just prior to reaching Israel, however, one of the places that he stayed at was Baghdad. And in Baghdad, in a beautiful rose garden in the month of April, 1863, he made a declaration that he was that manifestation of God that the Bab had professed. And there was such joy, there was such excitement in the group. And you can read online about that rose garden and how people enjoyed the roses that were piled in front of them. They would enjoy their tea there in a state of ecstasy, just a heavenly place in Baghdad where he made this declaration. And when he left, there were so many people who were so sad that he was leaving. In fact, they would walk on foot when he entered that prison in Israel, just to see a wave of his hand from his prison cell where he was for over 2 years. And then he was moved from house arrest to house arrest until finally he was freed and was able to enjoy some degree of comfort in a place called Bahá'í, which is where Baha'is also visit. And we can, it is open to the public. All Baha'i holy places are open to the public. So during that time in prison, he made this declaration even more public. So instead of just through that small group of individuals who were enlightened and kindled with his announcement and spread his teachings far and wide, he was able to write to the kings and rulers of the world. He wrote to the Pope at the time. He wrote to the Tsar of Russia. He wrote to the Queen of Romania, who actually became Baha'i, so through that letter, and wanted to visit him, but her ship was stopped. She was not allowed to come to visit him in his prison city of Akka. But this is how, from that very prison cell, he was able to spread his message to all corners of the world. And there were many people who came from the West, some Western pilgrims who came. Many of them were women. They traveled alone, and they came to pay their respects to this individual. One individual who also had the honor of meeting him was Professor Edward G. Brown, and you are welcome to Google him and what he describes as his first impression of Baha'u'llah. It is the best description in words of what we have of a messenger of God. And he describes how impressive and how majestic and how welcoming and how deeply affected he became when he reached the presence of Baha'u'llah. And then in 1892, Baha'u'llah passed away in Bahá'í, which is, thankfully, he passed away in freedom, having written over 100 volumes in his lifetime. Many of those volumes have yet to be translated. During Baha'u'llah's lifetime, he made sure that the Baha'i community knew that upon his passing, Abdul Baha, his eldest son, the first person to believe in Baha'u'llah when he first saw him at a very young age in his prison in the Siahchal in the Black Pit. He made him the center of his covenant. He made him the sole expounder of his writings. He made him the person that Baha'is look to for all the beautiful virtues that we all hope to attain. Abdul Baha demonstrated this in his life. And you can read about his life online. You can read about the many different impressions that he left on people from all walks of life. When he came to the US, to Canada, he went to Paris, he went to Germany, he went to meet dignitaries and diplomats in their fancy mansions and settings and dining settings, and he went to the most humble of homes. We actually visited one of his homes in New Hampshire, and we visited the church where he spoke at in Stanford. And the Baha'is here have an opportunity every year to go visit the church in Howard University where he spoke. And he was able to help progress the faith in the Western world. So these are some of the quotations that we will be using tonight for the discussion on the power of prayer and meditation. So desperately needed and so desperate for all of us to be in tune with our spiritual sides, to be connected to that indescribable essence that we know of as God, an unknowable essence. And I hope that with this, as was said before, I am not a clergy person. I have no position in the Baha'i faith, but I hope that this will allow each of us to investigate more and to really deepen ourselves in the writings and to exercise that new way that we now have to communicate with our one Creator through the exact writings written by the pen of the manifestation of God for the first time in religious history. It has never happened where a messenger of God has penned all these writings for us, all these prayers, all these ways of helping us communicate with our one Creator. That is, in fact, one of the principles of the Baha'i faith, which is so unique, and that is the independent investigation of the truth. And in fact, once we become Baha'i, that is only the start of our journey. We should always be striving to help our souls develop in its spiritual qualities throughout our earthly life. And I would hope that each of us take it upon ourselves to investigate not just the Baha'i faith, but all world religions, that they all come from one spiritual source. They are all points of light that have helped to cast this beautiful light upon the world in different stages of humankind, create different civilizations, help to burgeon the arts and sciences at various stages in our existence. And in fact, Baha'is believe in something called progressive revelation, that God will always speak to humanity, that we will always have a connection with our one Creator, and that this will continue to last until the existence of humankind is no longer here. And so this is part of this connection that we have with our Creator, that we are so blessed to be endowed, each of us, with a soul. That soul has this connection from the time of its creation, which starts, as Baha'is believe, at the time of conception and continues until the end of time. And that the purpose of our earthly life is to help to nurture this soul, to help to develop our virtues, such as truthfulness, kindness, courtesy. And how do we do that? The best, or I consider in my personal journey, is the best way to speak to that one creator is to speak in the words of the messenger of God himself, and to meditate upon those words, and to pray for the spirit, for spiritual progress of our hearts. And that is something that we can each do. There is no intervention in the Baha'i faith. There is no person who is higher than us. We have the ability, the capacity now to commune with our Creator with prayers that are very much accessible on the internet, that you can Google Baha'i prayers on protection, prayers on steadfastness, prayers on healing, prayers for the family, prayers for spiritual growth. And all of these prayers are designed to help us remind ourselves of our spiritual heritage and to empower us with what we do, how we choose to live our lives. Do we choose in that great free will that each of us is endowed with to do positive things, or do we choose negative things? And in fact, Baha'u'llah has said that please remember the spiritual heritage that each of us has, that nobility. He said, "Noble I have created thee, yet thou hast abased thyself." This is in a book called The Hidden Words, which I would encourage each of you to read. He says, and these are different passages, "O son of being," this is in The Hidden Words, "bring thyself to account each day, ere thou art summoned to a reckoning. For death unheralded shall come upon thee, and thou shalt be called to give account for thy deeds." So in the Baha'i faith, one of the spiritual laws is to read the writings in the morning to prepare ourselves for the day, and then to read them in the evening to also reflect on what we have done that day. What decisions did we make? Did we make the right choices? Could we make better choices the next day? This is how we can help to cleanse ourselves from the dross of this earthly existence and remind ourselves that we are here for a purpose, not just for our own spiritual growth, but to collectively effect change, which each of us is endowed with that capacity. Each of us has the power to exude such a presence among each other that can either be a positive or a negative force just by our own choices. And we hope in the Baha'i faith, we hope that each of us can use these opportunities that we have every day of our existence to effect a positive change. That change is going to happen because of a spiritual transformation of the planet that we know is the next destiny for our global civilization. So Baha'u'llah states in a book called The Gleanings of the Writings of Baha'u'llah. Now that is because this has been gleaned from many different books. As I said, there are over 100 volumes that Baha'u'llah has written in his lifetime. This is just gleanings of it. He said, "In the kingdoms of earth and heaven, there must needs be manifested a being, an essence, who shall act as a manifestation and vehicle for the transmission of the grace of the divinity itself, the sovereign Lord of all. Through the teachings of this day star of truth, every man will advance and develop until he attaineth the station at which he can manifest all the potential forces with which his inmost true self hath been endowed. It is for this very purpose that in this age and dispensation, the prophets of God and his chosen ones have appeared amongst men and have evinced such power as is born of God and such might as only the eternal can reveal." These are those points of light that are inherent in the messengers of God, starting from Adam, the very first human being. There was a connection that God gave to the very first person that existed on this planet to remind them of their spiritual heritage and remind the people of the time that each one was a noble being. And it was passed throughout the years, whether there is written documentation of this history or not. Baha'is do believe that God has always communicated with his loved ones. He has always been present with us. There is not one single time in human existence that God was not there. So there is no chosen person. We are all the chosen people of God. There was no one time when a messenger of God came. There were multiple times when messengers of God appeared, whether we are aware of them or not. We may know of some names: Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Zoroaster, Buddha, Muhammad, and now Baha'is believe in the Bab and Baha'u'llah, and that this is not just one time in human history that a messenger of God will appear, but there every 500 to 1,000 years, there will always be the need for a messenger of God to come and deliver both a spiritual message and change the social teachings. Some social teachings which have been changed are those of, for example, the equality of women and men. In the Baha'i faith, there's a beautiful description that women and men are like wings of one bird. If one wing is broken, the bird of humanity cannot progress. And we see that already in the world. These messengers of God provided us with spiritual nourishment. When we read the writings of any religious dispensation, we are uplifted. We are taken to a new realm. We are there to reflect on our lives, to reflect on our actions, and to truly incorporate these into action. And that is what the Baha'is do believe, that we are not here just to live a monastic life. We are here to put those prayers, those teachings, those exhortations of God into action. He states, and this is Baha'u'llah speaking, upon the inmost reality of each and every created thing, he, meaning God, hath shed the light of one of his names and made it a recipient of the glory of one of his attributes. Upon the reality of man, however, he hath focused the radiance of all of his names and attributes and made it a mirror of his own self. Alone of all created things, man hath been singled out for so great a favor, so enduring a bounty. In another passage, he states, the whole duty of man in this day is to attain that share of the flood of grace which God poureth forth for him. Let none, therefore, consider the largeness or smallness of the receptacle. The portion of some might lie in the palm of a man's hand. The portion of others might fill a cup, and of others even a gallon measure. Just so that you know that even though we may all be born with a certain capacity, we are all capable of expanding that capacity. As Abdul Baha has stated, there are many stages to perfection. Perhaps we know someone who is kind. There are many stages of kindness. Perhaps we know someone who is truthful. There are many stages of being truthful. And if we can all reflect on these virtues and pray and meditate upon them. That is how we progress in this world, to try to make this world a better place, to try every day to put those beautiful words that have been so eloquently stated in the Baha'i writings and all religious texts to action. As Baha'u'llah states again in the Book of Gleanings, it is incumbent upon every man of insight and understanding to strive to translate that which hath been written into reality and action. That one indeed is a man who today dedicateth himself to the service of the entire human race. The great being saith, blessed and happy is he that ariseth to promote the best interests of the peoples and kindreds of the earth. In another passage, he hath proclaimed, it is not for him to pride himself who loveth his own country, but rather for him who loveth the whole world. The earth is but one country, and mankind its citizens. Perhaps we know the golden rule in various religious traditions. In this most great dispensation, this new Baha'i era, this golden rule has now been elevated to such a level that Baha'u'llah states, blessed is he who preferreth his brother before himself. Let us meditate on that, truly. Is that how we act in the world right now? Is that where we are currently? This is what the future holds for us collectively, that we will prefer each other over ourselves. It is when we truly see this take place in our educational systems, in our justice systems, in the way we deal with each other in different countries, in the way we mete out different important resources in the world. Once we do this, we will truly see a united world. That vision is not just rose-colored glasses. That vision is very much in the focus of our minds as Baha'is and as many champions who are helping to bring about this heaven on earth, which Jesus Christ himself, in that beautiful prayer of his, told us, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. This has been professed by many religions of the past. And in Baha'i view, we feel that this is something very much attainable, very much within our grasp, if we only allow ourselves to be those perfect spiritual examples in the world. And perhaps we may not be perfect, I should say. And none of us are trying to be perfect. In fact, we can't. We are limited as human beings, but yet we can strive for that every day. In fact, Abdul Baha has said, and you can Google this, it's a beautiful song, strive that your actions day by day may become beautiful prayers. In fact, Abdul Baha said, man must live in a state of prayer. Let's meditate on that. Man must live in a state of prayer. There are so many times that we may be stressed by what happens in the course of the day, that we may be angered by each other, that we may do something that may not be suitable at the time, or we may choose a path for ourselves that we find may not be the proper path. And yet we can ask for forgiveness We do not need to go to see a member of a clergy to to intercede on our behalf. We simply have prayers of forgiveness. We simply meditate for ourselves on the word of God. And we find through that meditation, through that prayer, we find that next door, that next opportunity to help to exercise that virtue. As Abdu'l-Baha has stated, true faith is no mere acknowledgement of the unity of God, but rather the living of a life that will manifest all the perfections and virtues. In the Baha'i prayer books, there is a very beautiful quote from Baha'u'llah about the power of prayer. And I would ask that each of you try to Google this. In fact, if you probably simply just write Baha'u'llah intone, I-N-T-O-N-E, you will find this quote. And it's so incredible. It is such a powerful statement, because in the times of old, if someone wanted to show their devotion to God, they would walk in the streets and they would mumble the prayers, and people would feel that they're so pious and would acknowledge their devotion to God. And yet, Baha'u'llah has asked us to try to say these prayers in private, to bring out that sanctified atmosphere for ourselves in private. And yet there is a power when we are saying a prayer in that privacy of our chamber, as he states, that exudes such a force in the world. This is the quote. Intone, O my servant, the verses of God that have been received by thee, as intoned by them who draw nigh unto him, that the sweetness of thy melody may kindle thine own soul and attract the hearts of all men. Whoso reciteth in the privacy of his chamber the verses revealed by God, the scattering angels of the Almighty shall scatter abroad the fragrance of the words uttered by his mouth, and shall cause the heart of every righteous man to throb. Though he may at first remain unaware of its effect, yet the virtue of the grace vouchsafed unto him must needs sooner or later exercise its influence upon his soul. Thus have the mysteries of the revelation of God been decreed by virtue of the will of him who is the source of power and wisdom. This is the way that we can effect change in the world. When we truly meditate upon the word of God, we find a power that is beyond this earthly plane. We are able to move mountains that we could never move before. It is latent within each of us. It allows each of us to get up every morning, and regardless of the difficulties that we face, we are able to surmount these challenges if we only allow the word of God to take effect on our hearts. There is a beautiful quote by the great grandson of Baha'u'llah. His name is Shoghi Effendi. He was the grandson of Abdul Baha, and he translated many of the writings that we now have from Farsi and Arabic into English. He was amazing in his energy, and he helped to formulate the administrative order of the Baha'i world community. As was mentioned before, there is no clergy in the Baha'i faith. After Abdul Baha's passing, Abdul Baha wrote in his will that Shoghi Effendi would be the next to help as a guardian of the Baha'i faith, to help the Baha'i community spread worldwide. And that is what he did. He wrote many writings of his own, and you can read them. They have a completely different flavor to them. They are so powerful. They are so imbued with faith and with a very tenacious and uplifting and invigorating and emboldened writing. It is incredible. You really need to meditate just on one sentence that can literally be an entire paragraph long. He was very eloquent in both English and Farsi and Arabic languages. This is what he wrote in 1926. We must be like the fountain or spring that is continually emptying itself of all that it has and is continually being refilled from an invisible source. To be continually giving out for the good of our fellows, undeterred by fear of poverty and reliance on the unfailing bounty of the source of all wealth and good. This is the secret of right living. Just so that we have an understanding of the Baha'i administrative order, upon Shoghi Effendi's passing, there was, after a few years, the formation of the Universal House of Justice, which has 9 members, that started in 1963 and has persisted since then, with elections every 5 years. That is the international governing body of the Baha'i community, and they help to guide the Baha'i community in its administrative order. But the Baha'i faith, as I said, is very much an individual religion. It is something that speaks to your heart, that speaks to your soul, that allows you to see the true meaning of this life, as Abdul Baha said, quote, to acquire virtues. That is the purpose, the deep purpose of our lives. As was said in by Abdul Baha, there's a book called The Promulgation of Universal Peace. And this is a compilation of the talks that Abdul Baha gave when he was here in the United States. He visited so many states from the East Coast to the West Coast. And you can see all the talks that have been collected from that time. By the way, there is another book called Paris Talks, which is all of Abdul Baha's talks when he visited Paris. And it's literally a book, and it will say exactly the street that he gave this talk on. So, and here in this book, The Promulgation of Universal Peace, you'll see the exact address many times of the places where he gave his talks. He said in this passage, "For you, I desire spiritual distinction. That is, you must become eminent and distinguished in morals. In the love of God, you must become distinguished from all else. You must become distinguished for loving humanity, for unity and accord, for love and justice. In brief, you must become distinguished in all the virtues of the human world, for faithfulness and sincerity, for justice and fidelity, for firmness and steadfastness, for philanthropic deeds and service to the human world, for unity and accord with all people, for removing prejudices and promoting international peace. Finally, you must become distinguished for heavenly illumination and for acquiring the bestowals of God. I desire this distinction for you. This must be the point of distinction among you. The last quote that I would like to offer in this discussion is one from a book called The Divine Art of Living. Again, the quote is from Abdul Baha. And to me, this sums up what every messenger of God of the past and what every messenger of God in the future has asked of humankind to do. Abdul Baha states, "For in this holy dispensation, the crowning of bygone ages and cycles, true faith is no mere acknowledgement of the unity of God, but the living of a life that will manifest all the perfections implied in such belief." Thank you.
Wow. Well, it's so difficult to talk about somebody that you have known for such a long time and you love so much for so many years, really. The love of this lady for this precious faith has no bound, really. This is one of the attributes that I admire so much. And this has been reflected in her deeds all over, not just in one area. You can see it in so many areas. I have known this young lady for a long time, and as she said, she had come to Fireside when she was really very young, and her parents' house was about an hour away from our house. And most of the time, coming and going, she was asleep, in the house. But when she would come to the Fireside, she was I can tell you, a spiritual giant, you could say. And also, as you have heard, that she gave Fireside many, many times. She has given many times Fireside. We love her very much, and I don't want to really say more about it. I'm so thankful to her that she accepted tonight and to be here. Really, it's our pleasure, and we love you, Haideh John, very much. Thank you so much. Alex, it's all yours.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your excellent presentation this evening. And we do have a number of questions here coming in the chat, and I'll go ahead and read off some of the anonymous ones to kick us off. So the first off is, you mentioned in your talk how for the new Baha'is, there's certain texts that you may or may not recommend that they start with. So for those Baha'is that are or those individuals that are just coming to the Baha'i faith or are new to the Baha'i faith, for the text of Baha'u'llah, which books or tablets or writings would you point them towards in order to learn a little bit more and dip their toes into the waters?
Yes, sure. That's an excellent question. And luckily, I will say this, there are texts that continue to come, continue to be translated. So there is literally an ocean of knowledge, of wealth, of the writings that we have at our disposal. And it's so lovely to be able to have so much available to us in this age that we're living in, that we so desperately need such encouraging words. And I would say all of the writings of Baha'u'llah are so uplifting, are so encouraging, are so literally just, they take you to another realm. I would say probably the first one is the hidden words. It is such a very, it's a pithy book, a very thin book, very easy to read, and yet there is so much that we can glean from these statements of basically God speaking to humankind. And I would encourage everyone to feel free. All you have to do is write the hidden words and you will find that. The other is, oh, lovely. How lovely. Thank you, Alex. Just put that right there. How fantastic. Yes, the other one that I would recommend highly would be, especially for those who may come from a Christian background, would be Some Answered Questions. This is a beautiful book that was written by, as I said, remember there were many Western pilgrims who came on their own, traveled from America to that prison city of Akka in Israel, where Baha'is go on pilgrimage. And it is, thank you for that as well, Alex, that in the chat, it is there for you to read. It has many different topics that those of us who come from a Christian background, and actually just to give a little caveat, my parents sent me to a Catholic high school just so that I could read the Bible and learn about the Bible. They were so sure about this that they actually met with the principal of the school and asked that whether or not we read the Bible. And I was so nervous that the summer before that, I actually read the Bible from cover to cover. And then when I went for the first day, I realized nobody had read the Bible from cover to cover. So it was a really positive experience in my life to learn the traditions in Christianity, at least in that particular sect. And I was able to visit the Vatican and listen to the Pope's audience. So there were a lot of, and we visited Bethlehem, and it was just such a delight to be able to see literally the Bible in living form to the extent that we can now. So I had a wonderful experience. And I would say for those who are coming from a Christian background, that is probably one of the best resources to see how Abdu'l-Baha has described the life of Christ, how he has discussed about such important issues as free will, as all the different aspects of human life that I think would really benefit all of us. So Some Answered Questions, I would say, is wonderful. The other one that I would say that I really enjoy reading, and if you want to get to know how Abdu'l-Baha described the beauty of the principles of the Baha'i faith, is in that book, Paris Talks. Because this is where he speaks to people of all different backgrounds and how he addresses each person's burning questions, and the love that he exudes in his talks that really just demonstrated him to be that beautiful exemplar that the Baha'is look up to, because the kindness that he shows forth in those talks, the humility that he demonstrates, the way that he touches on topics that were very important at the time, describing the importance of the equality of women and men, describing the importance of the elimination of prejudices of all kinds, and how we can show love to each other. I think it's so timely right now. So that would be another book that I would recommend. Thank you. Oh, great. Excellent job, Alex. Thanks.
Of course. And I just want to make mention, I did not reference, even though you did reference the Bible there, I did not put a link to the Bible in the chat, figuring that folks had a copy of that anyway.
Yes. Yes. And
Right.
that is beautiful in and of itself, describing the history of so many, even the history in the Jewish faith, and just meditating on the Word of God in any form is something that I would encourage all of us to do. There is something to be said about not just understanding each other, but really truly meditating on the Word of God from each other's religious traditions. That is something that in this time, in this day, when Baha'u'llah has endorsed education as a means for the wings of humanity to elevate our souls, so that to be empowered with education, to read the Word of God for ourselves, that is something that I would encourage each of us to really take upon ourselves to do.
Thank you. And so let's dive a little bit into the concept of meditation, as we've kind of danced around it a couple of times this evening. In different cultures, there's a style of meditation, or there's a guidance, or kind of a prescriptive method of how an individual should meditate. In the Baha'i faith, do we have that same guidance, or is it left to the believer? Could you educate us on, how should we meditate essentially?
Yeah, I'd like to give you a little story about my husband's grandfather. He was the first member of my husband's family that I met when I was probably about 10 years old, when we went on pilgrimage, and he was serving at the Baha'i World Center. And he gave us this humorous and yet very enlightening story. So he was there greeting the pilgrims and also people of all faiths to this beautiful place called the Shrine of the Bab, that if you Google, you will see how majestic, how absolutely, it's called the Queen of Carmel, how majestic this building is, and how important it is for all of us when we go to any holy place to show a deep reverence. And so one day he walks into the chamber of the Shrine of the Bab, where pilgrims would come, and people from all world religions, all religious traditions, come to pay their respects to the last resting place of the Bab. And he sees someone doing a handstand in the Shrine of the Bab. And he immediately brings this person out, and he says, "This is not a place for gymnastics. This is a holy site." And this person told him that, "I felt so overwhelmed that this was such a sanctified place that I could not allow my feet on this ground." And so he was, of course, it just took him by surprise, and he relayed this story to us. And it had a profound influence on me, because, we, perhaps all of us, or those of us who have not been in any religious path, but maybe we have dabbled into meditation, we all have a different way that we may have been taught to meditate. I remember there is a beautiful passage of someone who relayed this story of Abdu'l-Bahá and how he prayed and meditated, and how they noticed that they asked Abdu'l-Bahá, how can I pray? And Abdu'l-Bahá said, "Well, come over and I will teach you how to pray." And I'm paraphrasing this story, but I think if you look this story up, you will find it, the details of it. And so this person, was waiting for Abdu'l-Bahá to come to the door, and he didn't come to the door. So he opened the door, and he saw Abdu'l-Bahá was already praying. So he waited and waited, waited for him to finish praying so that he could learn how to pray. And he saw just Abdu'l-Baha was just quietly, just closing his eyes, and he was praying and meditating. And so he waited, he looked up, he saw the crack in the ceiling, and then he was listening to the birds outside, and he was getting kind of bored. So he figured, okay, I'll just sit next to Abdu'l-Baha and just wait until he's done praying so that he can then teach me how to pray. And Abdu'l-Baha didn't stop. He just kept his eyes closed and just was in that same state of meditation, just sitting in a relaxed position and just with closed eyes. And finally, the person figured, okay, I might as well just do what Abdu'l-Baha is doing and just close my eyes and sit quietly and just wait for him to finish. And then he started realizing, oh, I'm not so aware of the birds outside. I'm not so aware of the crack in the ceiling. And he really got into that state of that spiritual feeling. And when he did, Abdu'l-Baha turned to him and he said, now you know how to pray. It's not the crack in the ceiling. It's not the birds singing outside. It's really being basically in tune with your soul, to share that time, to spend that time in that sanctified, however it comes to you, that sanctified place in your soul. So there is no particular way, method. Perhaps we close our eyes just so that we can, shut ourselves out from thinking about things that might be around us, and perhaps having either be in a quiet atmosphere so that we can really meditate on the Word of God. And so when we do that, I think that's where we start to really feel the true effect on our spirit.
Thank you. And as you were telling the experience of, first of all, what a wonderful story. And as I think about, what is the equivalent of seeing somebody doing a handstand in one of the most sacred places, in the Baha'i faith? The only metaphor I could think of was the equivalent of somebody coming into your home after there's snow and salt. We're in the DMV. There's snow and salt, and there's dirt. Everything is outside, and they take their shoes, and they take them off, and they walk over to your pillow, and they just wipe their shoes on your pillow, and you're going to be forced to use that pillow this evening, and that would be the equivalent emotion that you're feeling, saying, what are you doing? This cannot be possible.
Yes. There is a question in the chat. Do Baha'is conceive of meditation as a deeper level of contemplation? And there's a hand raised as well, Alex, just so that you know. But I think and this is in my own limited understanding, and truly I can't say what any particular Baha'i might feel about that particular question. I can only say what I understand. I would agree that meditation is a deeper level of contemplation. Contemplation, I think about contemplating on something, but then I'm not sure that I get the same journey. When I contemplate a topic, I think about that topic, and then I might move on to contemplating a different topic. But when I'm meditating, there's something very powerful to knowing where I am, or maybe we are unaware of where we are spiritually, but trying to understand ourselves as a spiritual being, and then moving ourselves along to that next stage in our spiritual growth. Meditation takes that journey to another level. So it's not just and when I think about meditation, actually there was a beautiful statement said by one of the prominent Baha'is in a talk that they gave. They said prayer is what God asks I'm sorry, prayer is what we ask of God, and meditation is what God asks of us. So prayer is what we ask of God, and meditation is what God asks of us. And that's really what meditating on the Word of God is. It's looking to see what is it that God is asking us to do, and then moving it forward to action. But there's a cycle about this. That's why we are asked to read the writings in the morning and in the evening, because we're asked to reflect on what happened in the course of the day and how we can make the next day even better. So there were two hands that were raised, Alex.
Yep, they flashed, then quickly subsided there. So, Anne Marie, are you ready?
No, yeah, I did it by mistake. I'm sorry.
All good. And then for the second individual that raised his or her hand, if you could just raise that again. And while we're waiting for you, there is another question that was put into the chat. In your talk, you also mentioned that the Baha'i faith reveres certain virtues. Could you take a minute to expound upon which virtues the Baha'i faith promotes?
Oh, there are so many virtues, and I think all of us can think of examples in the world of people who have demonstrated these virtues to a level that is really revered and admired. And I hope that we all, perhaps in this very special time, this 100th year anniversary of the ascension of Abdu'l-Baha, when he passed away in 1921, he left with us the legacy of his written word. He left with us the legacy of his example in the form of so many stories that we have to read. He literally helped to demonstrate so many of the virtues that we strive to attain. Some of the virtues, such as truthfulness. There's a beautiful quote that says, "Truthfulness is the foundation of all human virtues." This is a direct quote from the Baha'i writings that is incorporated into the children's classes that Baha'is around the world provide as a source of spiritual upliftment for children of all religious traditions. And that can happen even in your backyard. We Baha'is have all sorts of ways and means of outreach to children, to junior youth, and to adults from all religious traditions. And this is a quote that we really think about when we are communicating with each other. We hope to always have that spirit, that virtue of truthfulness forefront in our minds. There is another beautiful quote: "Courtesy is the prince of all virtues." Think about that. Courtesy is the prince of all virtues. Then we have kindness, we have generosity. So all of these virtues, if you can think of any particular virtue out there, and I don't think there's a huge list. In fact, we have a poster of that in our son's room. So then, and it's amazing to see all the beautiful different virtues. Thankfulness as a virtue, faith as a virtue. There's so many different virtues that you can think about that we strive every day to demonstrate in our lives. And I'll tell you, there's one thing to speak, and that's a direct quote from the writings. It said, Baha'u'llah states, "Let deeds, not words, be your adorning." Think about that. Let deeds, not words, be your adorning. How many times may have heard someone say something, and yet their actions may demonstrate otherwise. And yet times also when someone is demonstrated something that is so profound for us, so on another level, that they don't need to say their thoughts in words, because we can feel that love, we can feel that courtesy, we can feel that kindness exuding from that point of action. Yes, someone else has put in, yes, that prayer is when we speak and meditation is when we listen. That was something that was shared to me right now. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And that concludes our questions for the evening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sabet. It's really tremendous pleasure to have you to talk really tonight. And thank you, thank your husband, thank your mom, dad, everybody, and the mom and dad of your husband, everybody. Before we go, we have a closing prayer. Kindred, are you ready?
Yes, sir. O great and magnificent one, you are exalted above all. You manifested yourself in your anointed one, who has given us your true undeniable intent for humankind. Through him, the light of unity has shone forth above the horizon of the world, and the law of oneness has been revealed to the nations. We realize that there may be a long road ahead, but we are dedicated to your resolve and ask for your strength as we strive to demonstrate your attributes with a pure heart. Help us to be a shining example of love and understanding, of peace and of hope. Illuminate the eyes of our hearts and grant us the gift of becoming united, each and all, as of one soul. We go no place unless you lead us. Oh yes, wherever you lead, we will follow. Your design is flawless. It is us who have become flawed. However, every human formed by your hand is endowed with your life-giving spirit. You created every living soul with a longing to anchor itself to another soul, a longing for love. Though there are still many unknowns, you have instructed us on everything we must do to be your eyes, ears, and mouthpiece while we are yet here in this valley. Grant us the privilege of mirroring your character. We know that asking for this is only part of our objective. We know that we must put our hands and hearts to the plow, bringing ourselves to account on a daily basis, happily distancing from worldly desires and yearning for your enlightenment. Help us to be patient with each other and eager to assist in every good deed. Although our greatest hope is to explore the infinite vastness of your kingdoms, we unselfishly give our all in all to the betterment of all humankind. Stir up the hearts of your chosen ones, O God. Ready them to be steadfast and unmovable in maintaining uncompromising integrity. We look to you for all understanding as we offer up our sacrifice of service, love, and unity. Pour out your spirit like the rivers of fresh flowing waters. Guide the minds and hearts of the ones who are earnestly seeking. Help us to be a beacon of light on the dark paths of this broken world. We joyfully accept all endeavors, excited that we have been deemed yours and you ours. Glory, dominion, power, and majesty are yours alone. You are our first love. To worship you is our great honor. From time to time, generation to generation, you remain unchanged. Your perfect will is our foremost desire.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kendra.